Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the CEO Story. And we've got a fantastic CEO today. He's been in the Shark Tank and still lives to tell the tale. Stephan Aarstol, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Casey. I appreciate it.
We're really excited to dig into your journey. You run an array of amazing companies from Tower Paddleboards to Tower Electric Bikes. Like we mentioned already, you've been on the Shark Tank. You got funded by my favorite shark, Marc Cubans, who is an amazing guy, and I really look up to him, as well as being on so many of the Inc. 500 lists and other local rating lists, and kind of the accolades keep going on. We don't have time for all of the accolades. I think we've got the big ones in at least. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your story began?
Sure. I got into the internet space in 1999. So I think it was really sort of good timing. That's when I was coming out of grad school here in San Diego, and they were just handing out internet jobs. So, that's what I did. And I worked for another company for about 5 years, a company called antmini.com, which was in the radiology space. And so we created from scratch, it was a startup, an internet portal for that industry. And within a period of 3 years, we dominated that industry. And we sort of, took the position of traditional like medical journals and stuff like that. And that's really where I saw the power of the internet to create essentially monopolies. And I learned, internet marketing. After about 4 years there, I went off on my own as a side gig for a year and started a company called buypokerchips.com. I did that for about 6 years. It kind of went up, came down. I was looking for something else, job hunting actually right at the end when I started the Paddleboards.com. And that was in 2010.
So there's a lot of different things going on here. So let's kind of just break them down for people that are listening in and realizing that, okay, you didn't just go from zero to overnight success. There's a whole journey of learning, of kind of refining skills, of figuring out a mindset and a methodology before you created these successful businesses. So you cut your teeth for 4 years, learned an industry, and then you said something really interesting then. While you were still working, you started a side hustle. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you, one, picked the poker chips to go into, but also were able to kind of work on that on the side as still having a full-time job? Because I think that's a really good segue into further down in the conversation.
Yeah, I think a lot of people aggrandize like entrepreneurship today, but it's a tough slog. And what's really easy is getting a paycheck from somebody else and learning on their dime. And so I kind of wanted to do that. And so, that's what I did. And when I started the side hustle, it was, just evenings and weekends. And I got into poker chips because poker chips were trending. With the, some of the stuff I learned in the other company is we were doing pay-per-click starting in about 2000. Google AdWords didn't launch until 2002. So we were doing penny a click, pay-per-click with a site called goto.com. This was in the AOL, the Excite, the Yahoo days. And so we were able to build that company on the back of pay-per-click. And I sort of learned that, and I learned search engine optimization. And so when I was really deep into the search engines. And so with poker chips, I could tell a lot of people searching for poker chips, not many people were supplying them. It was hard to get them. I was in a poker chip game or poker game, and we were trying to get chips. And that's where I sort of identified that market, a lot of demand, little supply. And so I decided to, I bought $10,000 worth of custom poker chips on my credit card, which took 4 months to make. And then I pre-sold them and instantly sold out. And then that business sort of took off, but I didn't quit my day job until we did $50,000 a month in revenue in that side business to where I felt comfortable. And at the time, my wife at the time was pregnant, and the baby was due in 6 months. So there was a little more stress. Like it's not so easy to just quit your job.
So you mentioned another good point there. You didn't quit until you reached the target that you'd set yourself. So at that point, it was 50K per month. Which is different for everyone, right? I think the key point that I would take away from that is knowing what your number is. Everyone's number is different. Everyone's lifestyle is different. But if you can create a budget or map out what that target number is before you can transition, you can work backwards from that point and get to it more efficiently rather than not having it. Can you talk about how you created that number?
Well, it wasn't really a pre-planned number. It was just sort of growing and growing and growing. And it got to a level where I felt comfortable, um, you know, quitting my job, where I thought, okay, this really isn't going to disappear at this point. And that's a revenue number. So that's not, 50,000 in profit, but it was, within 6 months, I made more in 1 month's period than I made in an entire year at my day job. So it was in a pretty good trajectory. And I honestly wouldn't recommend most people jump into a side gig until you have sort of a path to making at least 3 times, what you were making before. If you're just going to make twice or a little more, then you just stay with the job. Paychecks are actually really quite easy.
Absolutely. So yeah, so everyone, you just have a different risk tolerance. And I think the key thing is make sure that the side hustle is actually working. There is some longevity there before you give away that security of a paycheck. So after the poker chips, you then got into the paddle boards, and that was quite unique because you guys were doing something very different to most other paddleboards companies. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, and I was really job hunting at the time I started Tower Paddleboards. And a buddy took me out paddleboarding and again saw this ramp up in demand for paddleboards. I went to buy a paddleboard and they were just ridiculously expensive. I live in San Diego here, sort of understand the beach lifestyle and what things cost. Surfboards were this price and paddleboards were $1,200 to $1,600. It didn't make any sense to me. And so I am having the background of selling the poker chips sort of direct to consumer. And this was sort of the trending times where that was when the start of the direct to consumer movement. Warby Parker was started in 2010 as well. I just thought, I could cut all the middlemen out, sell direct and sell these paddleboards for half price. And, that's essentially, what we did. And that led to us being, the number one fastest growing company in San Diego in 2014 on the Inc. 500 in 2015. And, Cuban invested on Shark Tank. At the time he invested, we had $100,000 in sales lifetime in the history of that company. And then since then, we've done over 40 million. So we've become I believe his best investment in the history of the show.
That's such a cool accolade to have as well, isn't it? Especially from the biggest shark of them all. So that was really cool. And then from there, you pivoted into the electric bike world. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you saw kind of paddleboards declining or kind of plateauing? So you switched to a different industry.
Well, that's the thing in the online world. It's something I've learned since 99. I've been in here over 20 years, is that these window of opportunities open and then they close and everything gets commoditized online and, marketers ruin everything. So if there's an opportunity, you seize that opportunity, especially if you do it in a very public way and people see it, they copy and they come after you. So nothing lasts. So like I said, with the poker chips company, 6 months out, I did more in 1 month than, I did in a year at my prior job. That was the peak of the poker chip business. And then it had a slow decline over, about 5 or 6 years. It wasn't like an immediate drop off, but it was just this slow decline. And I knew I needed to start something else. And I tried several other things and several of them failed. And then my buddy took me paddleboarding and I'm like, okay, that is a business very much like my poker chip business. I knew it, how that would work. And I could kind of see around corners there. So we, took off in that business but that business, started to go up too. But the world was changing. And I knew I tried to diversify right away in that business, to be honest. The whole idea was to start a beach lifestyle company. Paddleboards were the entry point. So we launched surfboards, we launched skateboards, we did regular beach cruiser bikes, we did snorkel equipment, we did sunglasses, we did all of these different things. And we were going to do a clothing line. Some of those worked, some of them didn't work. But then we came into electric bikes, and really we specialize in electric beach cruisers. It's basically anything beach lifestyle fits our brand. And we spun that out and we started that in about, I think, 2018. We started product development really in about 2016. We developed, the world's best beach cruiser first, like a belt drive, like $1,000 beach cruiser. And most beach cruisers go for 100 or 200 bucks, just so we could learn about, bike manufacturing and quality and what we could do there. And then we ported that design over into an e-bike starting in about 2018, because we really do have in today's world, everything's very transparent. So the way you do good marketing is you lead off with a quality product and a quality value proposition. You can't just have a good product because everybody else has a good product. So have that great product and then do something with your value proposition where, like direct to consumer, where you're cutting out a bunch of channels and giving, the best price on the best product. And so once you start there, then the marketing of that becomes easy. A lot of people, come to me and they say, oh, you're this SEO guru. Like, I want to SEO my product, or my company. And I'm just like, that's not really how it works. It's not like a layer on top. You're good at SEO because you have an incredible product and something to talk about. So you want to really start there, and then the marketing becomes easy. The marketing is impossible if your product isn't like really sort of extraordinary, or your value proposition isn't sort of extraordinary. And in today's world, I don't think you can even last.
I really like that. There's a lot of key things that you said there as well. As one is, it's easy to market if you've got a good product. And I think a lot of the times there's so many fake gurus out there promising the world and under delivering, and a coach for, I think, every single thing in the world at this point. It just gets totally draining. But when you really get down to the fundamentals, it's having a good product and having a good value proposition. It can't get more simple than that, right? Yeah. How do you do that though? Like, it's easy to say that. What steps could you recommend to people to, as an example, you said you tried a whole beachwear kind of collection and landed on the electric bike as the one to really kind of pay it forward after trying snorkel, sunglasses, clothing, all these other things. What made that one stand out the most? Was it just trial and error, or was there some other intrinsic thing that pushed you in that direction?
Well, the reason I think we can have success there is it's very similar to our paddleboards. It's almost an identical market. Like today in electric bikes, 2018, there were 300,000 e-bikes sold in the US. In 10 years from now, it's going to be 7 million a year, which is more than the number of cars sold in the US. So that's 2,000% growth happening in an industry over a period of a decade. Paddleboards were growing 100% a year. So when you're in those growth markets, especially in like paddleboards, that was almost like a new category. It's easier to develop a brand because you're coming from nothing to developing a brand. It's hard to go into an existing area and just sort of improve upon their products. These people have been marketing this for 20 years, 30 years, and 20 years on the internet probably. And so that's the poker chips, same thing. A boom in popularity in paddleboards, a boom in popularity in e-bikes. It fits our model with what I do. And I've done it, this is the third time. So I feel pretty confident that we'll be a leading brand at one point in the e-bike market. Some of the other products that we tried, they just weren't big enough markets. Like skateboards actually did pretty good. We have some sort of cool skateboards, but we didn't split that out into its own, segment because it wasn't a big enough market. Like paddleboards is actually kind of a sneaky big market. And then e-bikes is already a $30 billion market, growing at 2,000% in the US. So we're going to a transportation category. It's a massive market. But, with that comes, there's probably 300 brands of electric bikes, competing. So it's definitely a red water out there.
I understand. I think if we had to boil it back down, then the trend between the three companies is that they are all emerging markets and very fast growing based on the research and the numbers kind of side of things. So if you were to kind of look for the next one, if we fast forward to what the next company would be, is that something you would look at Google Analytics and kind of do your market research to see what is the next hyper growth market and get in there early? Or what's kind of the mindset and the decision making along that path?
Yeah, I think that essentially is it. You look for emerging markets. And right now, if you look at stuff, and a lot of this stuff is like stuff that you really don't understand, fully. And it's hard to understand it because you can't envision what that world is like until after it happens. Like with e-bikes, this is a good example. In the US, like people see bicycles as recreation and exercise. That's what the US sees it as. And if you look in China or Asia, all of Asia really, if you look in Europe, they see bikes as transportation, totally different markets. That's why there were 300,000 e-bikes sold in the US in 2018, but there was 10 million in Europe and 10 million in Asia because they saw traditional bikes as transportation. So what's happening here is we're transitioning from a marketplace where bikes are seen as recreation and exercise to transportation. So there's two things happening there. So it's a hyper growth market, and people are just going to think about bikes differently. A lot of people don't even know what an e-bike is or an electric bike is. They don't even understand that product exists. So there's education.
I love it. I love me and my wife both have electric bikes here in LA.
Okay.
We go cruising all over the place. So
They're life-changing, right?
Yeah, I'm already a big fan of it because it's just so much more relaxing. So yeah, I'm all for that. So can we switch gears a little bit and talk about Amazon? We'd mentioned in our previous conversations how kind of the Amazon effect affected business and what you did to counteract that. But I think a lot of people would really benefit from hearing how that panned out for you with your businesses.
Yeah. So, they did a Harvard Business Review case study on Tower selling on Amazon. They wrote that in about 2015, I want to say. And I've gone back to Harvard and talked on that pretty much every year for the last 5 years. So I've done it maybe 6 or 7 times. And Amazon has changed so much over that time. So it's a different case than it was originally. And the decisions, correct decisions to make in that case are 180 degrees from what they were when they started. And I've actually had a long experience with Amazon. I was selling on Amazon back, I think it's 2008. We were selling the poker chips. We were selling, some cards and stuff like that. When we got into the paddleboard company, I kind of knew we would get on Amazon at one point. It hadn't really become the everything store yet, but it was pretty close to that. But we were growing so fast. I knew our higher margin business was right in our business. But then when we tacked on Amazon, we really took off there. And we became sort of a poster child for selling on Amazon. We brought the Shark Tank, cameras up to Amazon. We did a deal, an exclusive deal with Amazon where we'd be selling our paddleboards there. I mean, at one point in our company, we were doing maybe 4.5 million on Amazon out of 7.5 million in revenue. So more than half our revenue. And it gets a little sketchy when you get that big of that far reliant on one company. And I kind of knew all along that Amazon was sort of this tiger. We were hanging onto the tail, and at some point it's going to turn around and eat us. And we saw them sort of turn around and take a look about 2016, and then 2017. I feel they really started to just eat the brands that were on there. And so we made the decision to start getting off at that time. But that's a tough thing to do for a company, is to walk away from 4.5 million in revenue, and then you're downsizing the company, and you really have to adjust a lot of things. And that was a difficult thing to come down off of. But I feel it was the alternative was we try to hang on to those revenues. You get addicted to that revenue, and then it's going to be a very bad outcome that comes all at once at you. So we tried to get ahead of that game. And we're now sort of fully off. We do about 10% of our revenue on Amazon, but we price there 30% more. And really how Amazon has changed is they went from being just a store that sells a bunch of stuff to being sort of the everything store, to then being like a replacement for original product search. They basically took over market share from Google on product search. And so even Google's had to react to that. So now if you're searching for product, more people go start on Amazon. And today it's largely a convenience store and a search engine. And so now the problem with Amazon is you have to pay basically, 50% of what you pay for something on Amazon goes to Amazon, and the brand gets the other 50%. And that's a combination of sort of the rev share, which is with, the fees and distribution and all that, 15 to 25%. We were paying, I think, about 26% when we figured it all out. And that's before you advertise. And we didn't advertise in the early days. And then, we had to advertise to be found. And today, you're going to have to advertise 10, 20, 30, 40%. So now Amazon's taking half the money, and that's insane. So that's really why we got off. We saw you can drive revenue on Amazon for sure, but the profitability, it's an efficient market that is designed for Amazon to suck all of the profit out of it. Very similar to how Google and AdWords is designed to suck all of the profit out of that. And so these two middlemen are really controlling, the e-commerce market in a consumer economy. And that's sort of a scary long-term proposition. And we believe, I believe there will be a reaction to that. About 2 years ago, we started a website called nomiddleman.com, which is an aggregation of all the direct-to-consumer brands like Tower Paddleboards and Tower electric bikes. We vetted and curated about 400 or 500 brands across about 3,000 categories of products and just listed them up there. It's just information, kind of almost like a consumer reports. Like, okay, you want to buy snow boots? Here's the 3 to 5 companies you should consider for that, and then go direct to them and buy direct. So it's just an information source. But I think things like that are going to be the future of retail. Amazon will always be there, but it's kind of like, buying something at your, local convenience store. You're going to pay a premium to buy it there. Super convenient, and a lot of people will do it. I love Amazon. I don't mind so much that it costs more there, but I think a lot of people don't realize how much more it costs. Like for our products, you can buy a paddleboard from us for $500. It's going to be about $700 on Amazon. Exact same product. One search, one click away, and you can buy it cheaper.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and thank you for sharing kind of the evolution over the years with Amazon. I've heard that story now from many e-commerce brands, specifically on Amazon, and often a lot worse because they didn't quite see the tiger coming as quickly as you did, to be able to migrate and kind of take the hit on the sales earlier to have that longevity of a business, right? I think that's a really key decision. What made you aware of that in the first place?
It's something I did duck my head on a little, but Amazon started to recruit Chinese factories direct, starting in 2016, and we were pretty tight inside Amazon. Like we were within like the senior ranks of Amazon. We were in a program called Amazon Exclusives, where we just sold on our website and just Amazon, no other marketplaces, not in retail. And because we did that, we had sort of a point person inside Amazon, and we actually helped them grow that program. We were the first brand they signed on out of 2 million brands that sold on Amazon. There were 15 brands that they sort of were in the initial pool. And so we had privilege, right, within Amazon. So it made it actually easier for us. And then even like their leadership meetings, like they would fly me and like 4 other sellers out, and they'd have all their whole executive team there, and they would sort of pepper us with questions and this stuff. So I got more of an inside look at what was going on there. We got hit with something, I think it was, I want to say 2017, we got hit with the taxation thing, where they basically, from all what it appeared, they sort of handed our names over to the tax people in Washington State and said, okay, you guys are responsible for sales tax now. They came after us retroactively, and they had to pay like $100,000. And it's like, we didn't know we had Nexus in all of these, warehouses or where they were distributing it to. And they sort of pushed that on, and there was no notice to us. And Amazon knew this was going on because they did a tax settlement with Washington, and they didn't notify the sellers or even, and I just said, okay, these guys really don't, I didn't think they really cared too much about my brand. But at that point I thought, this is an adversarial relationship. Amazon is using us until they don't have to use us anymore. And so the correct approach when somebody is treating you that way, I guess, is to use them until you don't use them anymore. So that sort of flipped the switch. That's a little tax issue. And the fact that they were going after, basically suppliers direct, and they were saying, we don't need brands. Well, my long-term theory is I think they do need brands. I just think a bunch of, crappy, paddleboards or whatever doesn't matter. Like the everything store without the good brands is the nothing store. You'll see that like Nike already said, you know what, we don't really need Amazon. They walked away. People that have established brands can walk away. And I think that was another thing is, we were fairly early in this, as a paddleboard brand since 2010, we're one of the most searched brands in paddleboards already. And so we could walk away from Amazon, where a lot of brands, they can't. They're addicted to the revenue. They don't really have a brand. As Amazon says, you don't have a brand, you have a price. And, and we're going to compete that price against a bunch of other people selling similar type stuff.
Well, it gets worse, doesn't it? Because not only will they compete with other people, they'll then come in and do their own Amazon originals, and they'll wipe the whole market out. They'll control that buy box for themselves. And then they have, like you said, they have the factories in China. So they have that full vertical now because they've got the customers on their platform. They'll put themselves in top spot, and they're creating the products themselves in China. So
sure. Yeah. Last time I looked, that was a couple of years ago, they have over 120 private label brands that Amazon owned. And most people know Amazon Basics, but they have brands in front. They have all these brands that people don't really realize that are Amazon brands that are sort of competing with a lot of other people. And that's fine. That's actually, it's the correct business move to make. I don't have a problem with anything they're doing. They're doing the correct business moves. The problem is the world, and I learned this back in, my early days in that radiology company, the world is such that it tends towards monopolies in almost a crazy way today. So they're making moves of a monopoly, market owner, but, long term, you get a little greedy. There's going to be reaction to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, some really good points there. So I'd like to wrap up with one question, and that is, if you had to attribute your success between three factors, those factors being drive, skill, and luck, how would you apportion that?
I think luck would be the first one. I think a lot of it is timing. I got out of grad school in 1999. I'm still in the internet business, so I think that just being in the right place at the right time. If you're graduating in Silicon Valley in the mid 90s, it's a good place to be, right? So I think that would be the number one thing. What were the other two that you mentioned?
Drive and skill.
Drive and skill. I think I would go drive second, and then I would go skill third, because I think really, if you look at most successful entrepreneurs, it's about this sort of unwillingness to die. You just won't go away. They can knock you down and you just get back up. And I think that is ultimately what leads to success. And I think on the flip side of that is like skill. Skill actually makes you kind of lazy, because you can rely on that skill. If you don't have that skill, it forces you to be sort of more resourceful and sort of more hard charging. So I think that can almost be a handicap in a lot of ways. You need to develop skill over time, but I think with just skill and no drive, I think, you can be a garbage collector. It doesn't get you far in this world.
Unwillingness to die and is the drive. I love that. That's awesome. I love that phrase.
A funny thing there is that I've tried investing. I invested in Bitcoin a little bit. I invested in the early stock market run up in like the 90s. I've lost money every time in investing. That skill that is success in entrepreneurship is the death knell in investing, because in investing, you have to know when to give up. You take your little losses and you live to play another game. You can't just sort of hold out forever. And so I found I'm not much of an investor. I'm good on the entrepreneur side, but it doesn't work for both.
Amazing. Stephan, thank you so much for taking the time. If people want to reach out to you or check out the websites, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so our social media for all the tower companies is @Tower Beach Club, which is our local event space, but that encompasses, the paddleboards, the e-bikes, towerelectricbikes.com, towerpaddleboards.com. With both those companies, we didn't even get into that really, but we wrote the book called The 5-Hour Workday, which we invented in 2015. If you buy either of those products, you get a book, just stuffed in the box. You also can get that on Amazon. And then if you're a consumer looking for sort of the best deal on stuff and really curated list of products, I would definitely leverage nomiddleman.com.
And we'll put all the links to all of those sites below for the people watching on YouTube, so they can click into the show notes and see that. Stephan, thank you so much for your time. You've been an amazing guest.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, Casey.
You're welcome.